Red China, Rusty Russia, and Red White Blue America, all explained with crayons. Hi, I'm Rick from Austin, Texas, and I'm resolute on making the Lone Star State shine from the floor of the U.S. Senate as paradise principle against the universal sky. Let me take some concept out from my thinking toolbox to get the job done. An example goes a long way to explaining the nuts and bolts of an idea. Let's pick trade wars. The consensus is that American democratic capitalism cannot compete against totalitarian capitalism, neither with China's communist capitalism nor with Russia's post-communist capitalism. On the one hand, Red China could very well overtake us as the world power in the foreseeable future, while on the other hand, though Rusty Russia cannot measure up against us, but it sure can do a lot of damage by exploiting our internal weaknesses. Be what it may, in either case, the Reds are beating us up front and the Rusties are doing it by the back door. The question is if the real threat to America is from within or from without or both. Let's start with a threat from without and finish with a threat from within, and then let's connect the dots to see how to resolve the challenge going forward. Let's take it from the top. Is Red China the real threat? But is it China as such, or is it the red of Red China? Allegorically speaking, the red in Red China stands for Marxist dialectics, which is basically the hybrid from crossing communism and capitalism and coming up with something that works better in practice than either of them separately. Hybridization is social science technology from the philosophical tradition of Western idealism of theses, antithesis, and synthesis as applied to real-world situations. This is nothing new. In the hard sciences, we have many things comparable. In biology, Mendel with his pea experiments discovered genetics by improving desirable traits and hybrid offspring by crossbreeding. The takeaway is that philosophy, science, and technology are all family related, so to speak. Historically, pure communism as such was a relative failure in the Soviet Union and barely managed to stave off starvation in Red China. All the while, American pure capitalism came out victorious in the aftermath of the Cold War. But that was then, and now is now. Quite a different story some 70 plus years later. In the meantime, the Soviet Union collapsed, but Red China ingeniously put into practice dialectics by crossbreeding communism with capitalism and came out with a more resistant field variety as social market economy or state capitalism, which far exceeded expectations. It is communist insofar as the Communist Party is in charge as dictatorship of the proletariat with no democracy, and at the same time it is capitalist, as defined by the market economy. So much for the threat from without, from Red China. Let's now address the threat from within, from Rusty Russia. Rusty's totalitarianism has a long history. It skipped altogether the 18th century European Enlightenment, precisely what the American experiment was all about. Modernity never really took roots there. Russia is actually half European and half Asian, sharing democracy with Europe and autocracy with Asia. Russia went through the Communist Revolution, a lab experiment of 19th century social sciences. America, on the other hand, went through the Liberal Revolution, based on individualistic ideas of the 18th century. Something similar applies to Red China. It too went through its own communist revolution. Both Red China and Rusty Russia have had ample time to go from theses to antithesis to present-day synthesis and competitive success. Today, Red China has its own patented version of state democracy with market capitalism, and Rusty Russia has its peculiar autocratic democracy with crony capitalism. They are both products of social science hybridization. Overall, the rationality of America is 18th century, while that of Red and Rusty's is 19th, 20th century. In closing, it's a no-brainer. We need 21st century ideas to stay on top. Let me say it in no uncertain terms. The way of success is applying the Paradise Principle as formula for social science hybridization moving into the third millennium. Now, if allegory is too abstract for you, let's go pre-K intuitive and try instead explaining things with crayons. Rule number one, Hybridization is like coloring. And yes, you do need to stay updated with coloring supplies. On the one hand, in the US, politics was originally meant to be the whole visible spectrum, from infrared all the way to ultraviolet. With the passage of time, it went downhill to today's red and blue duopoly, no while of a white spectrum. At worst, no coloring gets done, and at best, we color ourselves into the corner of some zero midpoint purple. On the other hand, Red and Rusty have been experimenting with crossbreeding, red with blue against a white background, and have come up with some quite creative artwork. But don't take my word for it. Ask your kid's art teacher next time you pick them up after school or during recess. Social science hybridization is the way of the future. But if we're going to be successful, let's use the whole science behind it of paradise, precisely what we're advocating here for the Senate floor. Please see accompanying slide. Oh, by the way, I'm Rick from Austin, Texas, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate 2020. I have the calling to serve, the message of paradise to disseminate, and the mission of re-civilization worldwide to realize. Éntrale a la bola, no seas canica. Let's roll, don't marvel. Yours truly, Rick, and GD bless.